For those who don't know Tara, you'll hear her story, but Tara has been on our staff now for a number of years, is our lead peer support specialist, and she does actually quite a few different things. I'm not even going to go into it, but in many ways has become kind of a key person that I lean on for a lot of the leadership and the work that we do, especially in our peer support work here at Lighthouse. And so welcome, Tara.
Okay, I wasn't nervous, but now I'm nervous, okay. Hi. So I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ who has suffered from addiction, past domestic abuse, anxiety, depression, perfectionism, food issues, and the list keeps going on, and my name is Tara.
Hi, Tara.
So they say you can't do your testimony at Celebrate Recovery until you have done a step study. The thought being that you will have worked through the emotions that have come with working through your hurts, hang-ups, and habits of the past. Having to put those emotions onto paper is emotionally, mentally, and physically draining. Add in those perfectionism issues I mentioned, and you end up spending hours on how to even start. After all that overanalyzing, typing, deleting, retyping, contemplating, questioning, here's the ever so perfect way that I chose to start mine. I was born. So the last day of March, back in the very early 80s, that's all you're gonna get, I was born to my teenage parents in Monoman, Minnesota. My dad, 16, and my mom, pregnant at 14, having me at 15. We lived between Roy Lake, Monoman, and Detroit Lakes, until finally settling here in Fargo. In the middle of that said epic era, my sister came along in 86, and for the next few years, it was us all growing up together. My dad passed away in 1991, and by 1998, my mom had remarried, gotten a job at 3M, and moved our family to Eagan, Minnesota. I was just starting my senior year in high school, and I had begged my mother to let me stay here in Fargo so I could graduate with my class the following spring. I was 17 years old when my family left Fargo. My best friend and I got a 2-bedroom apartment together. I lost myself. Where the partying and drinking started almost immediately. I went to school occasionally and did my work even less. In April of my senior year, I was called into my counselor's office and was told that I could finish the year, but I would not be allowed to walk with my class at graduation. I walked out of the school that day and never went back. We partied through the summer, and that fall, I drove to the Twin Cities and moved in with my mom and family, taking a job out at Mystic Lake Casino. Okay, you guys, I just have to say, I keep looking at Jim over there, and he keeps, before he told me to slow down, so I'm gonna slow down. Mystic Lake Casino. I had been introduced to a crowd of individuals from South Minneapolis, whom to this day I hold dear to my heart. I was 18 years old, running around in this chaotic world of Southside Minneapolis, where the excitement never stopped. I met one of my best friends and a man who to this day I still call my brother. There were guns, drugs, and drinking until the sun came up, all the excitement that a sheltered 18-year-old from North Dakota is looking for. The diversity of South Minneapolis made me feel more at home than I had ever felt in my entire life. When you grow up in Fargo and go to high school with kids whose parents own Shotwell Floral and Corwin Auto, and your mother works part-time at a church and part-time at Hooters, you get a complex about yourself. My mom's really cute, guys. Okay. In my teenage years, I had already instilled in myself that my family was less than, constantly comparing myself to the good fortunes of others, meanwhile not recognizing the blessings that I already had. Now, don't get me wrong, love me some Hooters wings, okay? Love me some Hooters wings. Not embarrassed to say that my mother worked at Hooters. I'm actually proud to have a mother who did what she needed to not only support her family, but herself while she went back to school. My new friends and I partied our way through the next few years. There was a point in that time where our drinking was so bad that I had officially been labeled the designated drunk driver. One time I lost the car, and it took us the better part of the day to find it. We only found it at Minnehaha Falls after the police called about the suspicious activity involving the vehicle. To this day, still don't know why we were at the falls, but we had left the driver's side door open, my shoes in the grass, and my best friend's purse down the trails leading to the falls. So can you imagine what that scene looked like? We laughed it off, made it into a great story to tell others, and we're back at it again the next night. No lessons learned and no cares given. I had my oldest daughter in November of 2003. Having her should have been something that changed my life, but it did not. Even though I had enrolled in college at Augsburg in Minneapolis, working full-time, still not enough to keep me away from that lifestyle. Every Friday after work at the cancer center, I'd bring my daughter out to my mom's house and start my weekend-long party. At first, my daughter's dad wasn't doing cocaine with us. My best friend and I were hiding it from him because we're so sneaky. His best friend was the bouncer at the bar we would go to, so we would start the weekend there. We'd end up doing lines in the bathroom all night and then continue wherever the after party was. There were so many Saturday mornings we would end up back at the bar still partying from the night before, and we would close the bar down again. Eventually, my mom stopped trying to get a hold of us on Saturdays to pick up my daughter, and she would just show up at our house on Sunday evenings to drop her off. In 2005, I met someone who would change my life, where I would subsequently live in darkness for the next 10 years. After meeting him, I had become pregnant with my second daughter rather quickly, and things moved even quicker from there. I was no longer working at the cancer clinic, but was working for the chief of surgery at Abbott Northwestern Hospital. During those years, I was the sole support for our family. I accepted the job for the surgeons when I was 8 months pregnant. I was too nervous to tell them that I would need time off soon, so I chose not to tell them. On Wednesday, I started having contractions, and as we were leaving that day, I let the office staff know that I would be gone for the rest of the week because I was gonna go have a baby that night and I'd be back on Monday. I was blessed with my first son that night, and I was back to work on Monday, just like I had said, because those bills still needed to get paid. In May of 2009, I gave birth to my fourth child. Within a month of her being born, I was pregnant with my second son, who was born in April of the following year. For those of you keeping count, we're at 5. We're at 5. I do not remember why we started fighting that day in April, and I don't remember driving myself to the hospital either. I do remember pulling up to the emergency room door, getting out of the Ford Explorer, and yelling that I was in labor and that I needed a doctor. Doctors told me that the trauma of my accidental fall was what caused me to go into labor. The doctors also told me that by the looks of the swelling around my neck, had it been any harder or longer, there would have been permanent damage. Besides my mom, sister, and close family, no one knew what was happening in our home until that moment. I had become so good at putting a smile on my face and let everyone know that I was okay. I have blocked out the next 6 months of my life, literally. To this day, all I can get is bits and pieces of that time. In August 1st of that year, I found myself crying. I had a black eye, and I was calling my mom. I was telling her, again, how I had enough, I was done. Mom, I am not doing this anymore. Mom, help me, please. Mom. We called all the battered women's shelters we could find in Minnesota. The problem wasn't that we could not find a bed for me. The problem was we couldn't find a bed for us. Not many places can take a woman with that many children. Someplace safe in Fergus Falls answered that night and said that if I could get there, they would have room for me and all the kids. That next night, I boarded the Greyhound bus with 2 suitcases, 5 children, and $100 in my pocket at 9 o'clock at night. The bus ride was not as traumatic as you would think. What was traumatic was getting dropped off at a closed gas station at 1 o'clock in the morning in the middle of nowhere. Just me, my 5 children, the gas station, and the dark, silent night. Good news is, kids and I made it to the shelter. That night, we stayed there until the beginning of September when I was able to get housing with a cash-in-hand landlord. Bad news was that it was not long before he had made his way to Fergus Falls and that cycle had begun again. Trying to sneak 5 kids out of the house in the middle of the night, every noise you make is amplified by 100. You hold your breath as your ears start to ring. The anticipation of him waking up and stopping you is more than you can bear. Your heart beating so loudly, you are sure the entire world can hear it. Sadly, this was not the last time I had to feel these emotions. No matter how much I swore I was not going to do it again, I would always go right back. Sometimes it felt easier to stay, and in November of 2012, I gave birth to my final son. Not sure why I made the decision or when I had made it, but I had made the decision to fight back. Things didn't change for me immediately, though. In fact, things may have gotten worse. The Lord works in mysterious ways because a year after I made the decision to fight back, he was arrested and sent to prison for unrelated charges. After all the years of abuse, all the years of praying for the wrong things to happen to the wrong person, he was peacefully removed from our home and taken out of our lives just as quickly as he had come into mine. Love to say that this is where my life changed forever and the kids and I lived happily ever after. Sadly, that's just not the case. As a single parent with 6 children, going to school full-time, working full-time, no matter what I did, the bills piled up and the paychecks were never enough. I met someone who was able to provide me an out. He introduced me to methamphetamine, and since I did not do it, he was going to show me how to make all the money I needed. I asked for an ounce to get started, and he gave me a quarter pound. I had gone from being someone who would walk around with their head down to someone who was able to hold their head very high. Quickly, so quickly, the drugs and my character defects of wanting to exceed at everything I do in life made me someone who demanded money, demanded power, and who demanded respect in everything I did. In my mind at the time, my kids were going to school, they were fed, and they were bathed. They were taken care of. The only problem was that those things weren't being taken care of by me. There were people living with me that were reading bedtime stories, giving bubble baths, and enjoying moments of life that I was choosing not to be a part of. Moments that I would never get back. I was gone living a fast life, making money moves, bringing the chaos of Southside Minneapolis to Fergus Falls. You see, one minute you're in school working and you're feeling in control. The next, it's your son's 4th birthday party. You have a house full of people, sweat dripping down your face, just trying to make your fry bread, flailing out, trying to find a flower sitting right there on the counter in front of you. Before long, you quit both work and school. You're doing hot rails on the bed while your new boyfriend is shooting up on the other side of the room. Pretty soon, a quick run to the cities turns into days of, I will be home in a bit, kids. I promise, I'll be home in a bit. September 11th, 2015, I was pulled over 2 blocks from my home. I was told to step out of the vehicle, and when I asked the reason, I was told for the possession and sale of methamphetamine. When I was put in the back of the cop car, I could hear commotion over their radios. I could hear the words clear being said over the radio, and it wasn't until I heard the dog bark. And then the cry of a 7-year-old girl for the police to not shoot her dog. Did I realize that I was listening to my own home being raided, and that the cries that I was hearing on the radio were the cries of my own children. That dog, that stupid dog barking, the kids crying in the radio, the lights flashing all around me, my sense of reality so far gone. I was booked into the Ottertail County Jail that night, and by Monday morning, I was being charged with first-degree sale of a controlled substance, first-degree possession of controlled substance, child endangerment charges, and a few firearms and weapons charges. My aunt and my mom took custody of my children, my oldest daughter going to live with her dad a few miles from my mom. I remember being so mad at my mom for letting my kids get split up. How could my mom let my kids get split up? How could she not figure it out and keep my children together? I can even remember telling her how awful she was for letting my aunt take my kids because she was barely even Native, Mom. She was going to take them to church. We don't go to church. She's going to try and teach them about a God, and Mom, you raised us not to believe in God. I was blaming my mom for my actions, not being grateful for having family members who actually stepped up to take 6 children, not realizing that that in itself is a blessing not everyone is rewarded. I remember a phone call with my aunt where she quoted Romans 8:28. And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for him. I didn't understand then, and all I can do is laugh about it now because I did not know then how much God was calling me according to his purpose. When you sit in county jail for 9 months, you start to do any kind of program you can to get out of the dorm. Gym, library, Bible studies, and church. So an extremely passionate woman who came to do a Bible study faithfully every week while I was in county jail. Her name is hard for me to find now, but her face and her passion for the Lord, I'll never, ever, ever forget. There was Pastor Chuck who came in and talked to me many, many times. And these two kept planting seeds about a guy named God, a guy who's loving, faithful, and merciful. A God who, if I put my trust in him, he would get me through this time in my life. But at the time, I found absolutely no comfort or understanding in those words. May of 2016, I pled guilty to second-degree sales of controlled substance and was sentenced to 86 months, roughly 7 years, in the custody of the Minnesota Department of Corrections. Sunday before I left for Shakopee, I went to the women's Bible study again, and that night, she played Amazing Grace, which was cool because she had never played music for us before. Didn't mean much to me then at that time either, but Amazing Grace is where my story really, truly begins. 17 minutes later, and here's where my story begins, friends. After arriving at Shakopee Prison, I immediately applied for a program they offered called the Challenge Incarceration Program, better known as boot camp. I applied because I was told I could get out of prison early if I were accepted. Had I known that when they said boot camp, they really meant boot camp, I'm not sure I'd have applied, honestly, okay? It's up at 5, down at 9s, push-ups, cadencing, gig lines, 45-degree angles were something I was not prepared for. And I started attending church service while I was in general population. I don't know why that fit in there. The night before I was set to go do the black line, which is really a nice way of saying you're carrying a half a mile of pain around the perimeter road of the prison where you have to carry all of your belongings in a shoebox held straight out in front of you while being yelled at to keep up, sometimes doing push-ups, crunches, mountain climbers, and whatever else they want to throw at you until you think you're about to die. I went to church services to say goodbye to a few women that I had met. That night at services, Amazing Grace was played for us. Thought to myself, I know that song. This time, they had handed out a piece of paper that had the lyrics typed on it, and I listened to the music and I read the words. When we sang the words, "My chains are gone, I've been set free," I remember picturing no handcuffs on my wrists and walking out of prison. At that time, that's what I thought Amazing Grace meant to me. Started the 6-month CIP program, Charlie Squad member. Was trying to get out of prison early, but I wasn't trying to put in the work. I had been preparing my whole life to fake it to make it, and why would this be any different? I remember going into my first hat review. This is where you are told all the wonderful things you are doing. You get a new colored hat, and you are 2 months closer to freedom. Didn't get my hat that day. I was given a decision to graduate from boot camp with the new Delta Squad or go back to general population for the next 4 years. That moment right there is the moment that I chose to fight for my life. It was time for me to put in the work, the actual work, to get out of prison. I actively participated in treatment class, the first time I looked at what 10 years of abuse looks like for me, but barely scratching the surface of that trauma. Started attending weekly church services and smudging. Favorite thing about our church service was worship music. Increasingly, I had begun to rely on faith to get me through my days in the Novello unit without even knowing it. I realize now that it was God who I was talking to as I would watch those sunrises peak on another morning while running miles on that perimeter road that I will never, ever forget. That's a lot of miles. July 3rd, 2017, I was released from Shakopee Women's Prison, a proud graduate of the Challenge Incarceration Program, Delta Squad. Still did not have a full understanding of the Lord, however, or the things he had already done in my life. As I walked out of those doors that day, I knew that I had a long, winding road ahead of me that led somewhere. I didn't know where, though. You want to know who did know? God. God knew. He knew all along that day, that moment would come when I would walk out of those doors. He knew that eventually I would be led to Lighthouse Church as well. 2 of my boys were living with my mom in the cities, and 3 of my other kids were living with my aunt in Moorhead, which is how I ended up there. I struggled with the fact that I didn't have control over my situation with the kids. I could not see them anytime I wanted to. My aunt had me on a strict Wednesday evening and every other weekend visitation schedule. I couldn't not find a way to look past how unfair she was being to me because those were my kids. And my thought was that I had a right to see my kids anytime I wanted to. There were many tears, many cuss words, and many prayers for strength to get through. It took a year and lots of conversations with God it took years and lots of conversations with God to realize that because of my actions, I did not have a right to my kids anytime that I wanted to. Because of my actions, I had to live by someone else's guidelines, having to complete a multi-step care plan, prove to the court, to Indian Child Welfare, that I had made the necessary changes in my life. July, 1 year later, with the Lord by my side, I was awarded full custody of all my children. I started coming to church the September before, 2 months after my release. When I walked through those doors for the first time, I came in chasing a man and not the Lord. It's a true story. 2 years in prison had not changed me as much as I thought, and at this point, I don't recommend that, ladies. Don't recommend it. Just saying. We only came a few Sundays a month, but when we did, we always sat right there in front. Did not start coming to Celebrate Recovery until about a year later. I'd always wanted to come, but never made it a part of my routine. When I signed up for the first step study, I went into it thinking I was going to work some steps and read some scripture. What happened was so much more. I started looking at myself, an actual look at who I am, who I wanted to be as a woman, who I wanted to be as a mom, and who I wanted to be as someone's life partner. The women that I met in that step study share a special piece of me, a very raw and a very real piece of me. My step study did not change my life just because I went through the motions of it. It changed my life because I let it. It has sent me on a lifelong journey of mental health, recovery, and healing. And even on days that are a total failure, the days where I forget to put God first in everything that I do, I have a whole new set of coping skills in my toolbox to help me get through those days. In 2019, I was still dating that man I had been chasing at church, and we had bought a bigger house together. His daughter moved here from California to be with us, making our kid count 7, friends. Not change the chaos for the world, though. I became a peer support specialist here at Lighthouse Church in April of that year, where I got to walk alongside other women re-entering the community and being a part of their recovery journey. I got to use my story to relate to others, all while spreading the words of hope and encouragement that I have found in Jesus Christ. Christmas of that year, got engaged right here in the basement of this church while serving Christmas brunch, pre-COVID. You can still hear Lisa Overby Blosser's yelp, the look on Lisa Roning's face when she realized what was happening, and Dale coming down 6 minutes too late and saying, "Ugh, I missed it?" On August 7th, 2020, in the height of a pandemic, I got married to the most patient and understanding man God could have sent me. He is learning my mental health journey with me and for the most part takes it all in stride. Even on my most crazy days, he's always there on the other side, asking me if I'm ready to quit being mean and start being nice, making me laugh, or just comforting me in my most uncertain times. He's always there, even when all of my actions are telling him not to be. We may not be perfect, but I continue to work on myself, taking care of my side of the street while he does the same. It's very easy to be codependent and want to fix each other, but finding independence and continuing to work on ourselves is how we continue to grow. Through my step studies in my community, and of course with my Savior Jesus Christ, I have been able to find some forgiveness in my heart for the 10 years of darkness that my children and I endured. Not full forgiveness, as I continue to work on that in every step study that I do. I will tell you that there is more of an understanding of what I went through and why I stayed in the situation for as long as I did. God has taken all of that pain and used it for good in my life. He has taken that hurt in me and has used it to help other women, men and women, realize and understand that they are not alone in their secrets. First time I heard the worship team sing Amazing Grace, I was sitting right there. The words on the screen were blurry because of the tears openly flowing down my face. All of a sudden, the words no longer meant shackles and physical freedom to me. They meant that I was free to let go of all the chains from my past that were holding me down. All the hurt I caused my children, all the shame from my repeated decisions no longer held as much weight for me as they had moments before. I was free to let the tears flow, to feel the built-up years of emotions. It's like I'd feel this weight lifted away as each word was sung loudly through this sanctuary, my hands raising higher and higher in worship. Had I not gone to prison, I would have never found amazing grace, His grace, like I have found it. My chains would not be gone. I would not be set free here today had it not been for Sergeant Comroe, Ma'am Carlson, and Officer Lindahl and that black line of death. I would not have new life today, because by His amazing grace, I was able to use that experience to turn my life around and stay focused on tomorrow, never looking at the past. Like Psalms 23:4 says, "Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close behind me." The Lord has been beside me on my journey through this thing called life the entire time. When I needed Him the most, He was with me. He loved me enough to take me away from my children and save them from the one person who could hurt them most, me. Proverbs 3:5 tells us to trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. My whole life, I depended on my own understanding. To be quite honest, I depended on no understanding. Last month, I celebrated 7 years of recovery. Proud to say that I have a better understanding now than I ever have before of how much my life would have been different had I found God's love and grace earlier in life. I can also say that I have found those things when God wanted me to, in His time and in His will. I struggle every day with giving things over to Him and living in His will, but there's a beauty in doing so. Every day I get to offer vulnerability and humility, getting to experience His love and grace in new ways all the time. I'd love to sit up here with a smile and tell you that life is perfect. I'm a perfectionist. Had years of practice how to do that, right? But I have been blessed to have built a community of individuals around me who call me on all my fake smiles, taking the time to remind the person who always looks like they have it together that it's okay to not have it together. I still have work to do with Zach by my side, a recovery community full of some pretty awesome church people, and God at my back. The smile you see on my face today is genuine, and I'm probably crying because I have found amazing grace. Thank you. How long was it?
You may be seated. So just want to say quick, because you just heard her whole story, that what you probably know is that Tara has worked very hard. But I wanted to just point out something that really fits, I think, for where so many of you are. And that is that, the one who really did a lot of hard work in Tara's life was our Lord, Jesus Christ. And what Tara did most effectively was sat there and decided to be open to what God wanted to do in her life. She's been always willing to learn and to receive and to give. And it's been a joy to watch and to work with her, and it's my privilege to give to her 7-year medallion.
So I've been up here for a long time and I'm sweating, and so all I can say is that, the people say, how do you do it? You put in the work. You put in the work of what you're supposed to do, and you continue to do the next right thing, and you just realize and you understand that God has your back. No matter what kind of day it is, God's got your back. Thank you.